family members of any person presently serving in the United States, UK or Australian military, or who has died or been seriously injured in Afghanistan or Iraq need to contact the Voice of the World as a matter of urgency. We can put a stop to it now. All it requires is an email to admin@tvotw.com or to follow the general course of action to be announced soon after the release of this documentary, Unspeakable Evil. Please answer this for me. What sort of genuine president in the form of Hamid Karzai allows his country and its people to be bombed back to the Stone Age by the United States and other NATO forces continuously for more than 10 years after he was inaugurated in December 2001 and after offensive operations were supposed to have been completed? Karzai, an ex-Unocal oil executive, was America's hand-picked man for the job, and as such he has done as he was told ever since. He is due to step down in 2014. That's just one more reason why they can't leave before then, because if they do, the people of Afghanistan will have their revenge the moment foreign forces leave. Furthermore, you only have to look at the attitude and behaviour of David Cameron, Prime Minister of the UK, at a recent emergency Euro summit, at which time all members of the Eurozone voted for the resolutions put forward, but Cameron, the one out, voted against. All at a time of the Eurozone's greatest need for support, a concerted team effort, and a solution to the present economic dilemma it is facing. I take this most prophetic quote from our 28th of March 2010 documentary entitled British Election _2010 Part 3.mov in reference to a statement by David Cameron on banks. And I quote, "What this announcement fails to address is the real issue that people are concerned about regarding banks, the availability of credit and the cost of credit. In addition, what this announcement has served to highlight and demonstrate is a much more serious matter for the British people, a core issue which goes to the very heart of this election. It highlights a level of incompetence, a lack of experience, a limited level of academic and intellectual ability, a level of ineptitude, a confirmation and warning to the British people of the qualifications, ability and readiness of the Conservative Party to take over the reins of power, the credentials necessary to take over the responsibility of government for the British people. Presently, the country and its people are going backwards in every department. It's about the stewardship and the proper management of the affairs of a great nation. It's about creating the prerequisite social and economic environment and circumstance in which the British people can prosper. The right policies for the long-term welfare and sustainability of a way of life with all things in balance that the British people have earned, deserve and are entitled to. And more importantly, it's about the faith and trust given by the British people to their political leaders and politicians who are the right people for the job, who are best able to deliver the performance and the capability necessary to excel." End of quote. A level of incompetence? Here's the quote from the Daily Mirror 2nd of July 2012 article on Cameron's European referendum U-turn. Quote, "Calamity Cameron is shaping up to be the most incompetent Prime Minister since the War of Jenkins' ear between Britain and Spain in the mid-18th century, that is." End of quote. And further on, quote, "Now the great chillaxer of Downing Street is a part-time Premier making a full-time hash of the job." End of quote. As you can see, the Voice of the World and the Global Fund provided this very insight for the British people nearly 2.5 years ago. As at the date of this production, the mass media is promoting and disseminating propaganda specifically aimed at destabilising the euro and the removal of Greece as a member of the eurozone. Such a possibility will have dire economic and social consequences for the people of the eurozone and the single currency. European leaders must shift heaven and earth to make sure this does not happen. The US and the UK treat the European Union as the United States of Europe. This is a threat to the United States' hegemony and control. The truth is, European leaders should and must treat the Eurozone as the United States of Europe. This involves much closer political and fiscal integration. The Eurozone needs to start working together as a team, identifying, highlighting and building upon the strengths of the respective countries, thereby creating the foundation for a future of prosperity and financial security for all. Within a relatively short space of time, Greece's current economic and unemployment problems will become a thing of the past. The people of Greece will respond by working to see a commensurate increase in the country's GDP, as will Spain, Portugal, Ireland, and for that matter, the rest of the Eurozone. Attacks designed to undermine confidence must be ignored and rejected out of hand. The most prominent of these attacks comes from US-based credit rating agencies and US and UK-based mass media. These attacks need to be put where they belong, in the trash, figuratively speaking, out of sight, out of mind. The preceding objectives can be achieved and it can produce the desired result in a matter of 18 months to 2 years. Confidence is the key, together with a grim determination not to fail. However, the ace card for European leaders and their peoples and the guarantee of success and the future prosperity of the Eurozone will be the admission of Turkey as its newest member. The people of Turkey have publicly expressed for years their unreserved willingness and desire to be a part of Europe, and the vibrancy and the strong underpinnings of the Turkish economy can only contribute and add support and strength to the current and future economic well-being and success of the Eurozone and the Euro. The strength of the Eurozone lies in its ability to draw together all member states into a world trading bloc to achieve the critical mass required to survive and prosper in the long term. The following interview will demonstrate the poverty facing people in Britain today.
It was under, in America, the Reagan years, and in Britain the Thatcher years, when the tide was changed. But the increase in inequality has happened in many parts of the globe. It's just been allowed to happen more ferociously, if you like, in Britain and in the United States than, say, in mainland Europe.
This is the trickle-down theory you're referring to, that if you create more wealth at the top, it trickles down to all levels.
There was more faith in trickle-down in the United States and in Britain than in much of the rest of the rich world, and it became patently obvious by the end of the 1980s, start of the 90s, that the trickle-down wasn't trickling down. So having faith in something that doesn't work is certainly a problem. What normally happens when there are recessions, particularly the Great Crash in 1929, is that the gaps narrow because the rich lose more, say, of their share income and so on. This hasn't happened since 2008. In Britain, house prices have carried on going up in the middle of London, where the very richest people live, so their wealth has gone up and up. But in the rest of the country, housing prices are dropping, incomes are dropping, average living standards for average people are dropping, and they're dropping fastest for people at the bottom because of benefit cuts. So this is an unusual recession and cut so far, in that what's happening in Britain is that the rich are actually getting richer, the average is getting slightly poorer, and people who are poor are doing much, much worse than they were 2 or 4 years ago because a whole set of things are being taken away from them. what you need to have a much lower rate of poverty, you need a much more narrow income distribution. So fewer people are being paid enormous salaries and fewer people are being paid tiny salaries. That's how you get rid of or reduce child poverty to some of the lowest levels in the rich nations of the world, is by not having a really wide distribution of incomes. What
would you regard as an acceptable wealth gap?
When you ask people what kind of gaps are acceptable, they tend to say fairly narrow gaps, or what somebody like me thinks is fairly narrow, so somebody earning 10 times more than somebody else. Now, our chief executives of the biggest companies in Britain are earning at least 300 times more than the average worker. Recently, government in Britain looked at imposing a 20-to-1 ratio in the public sector. The idea that nobody paid by government should earn 20 times more than somebody else paid by government in that same organisation. But the government here rejected implementing it.
You've said the British are now the Americans of Europe. What do you mean by that?
It's not great about modern America. For instance, the British per head lock up more people in their prisons than anywhere else in Western Europe. We have, well, way over 80,000 people locked up, and it's rising rapidly since the riots this summer. America has 2 million people locked up. America is one of the few big rich countries in the world where you have people going hungry and having to be given food stamps in large numbers and so on. But Britain is the country most similar to that and is moving towards the American degree of inequality and normality. And from my point of view, this is a tragedy, because there is no need in these incredibly rich countries for children to be born into and to be growing up in the kind of poverty that the documentary has just shown.
Do you have any doubt that there is a connection between the recent riots in Britain and the inequality that you've measured?
What some economists have done a brilliant job of showing when they've used data for the last 100 years, from disorder in Germany in the 1930s right through to Greece in 2010, there is a statistical relationship that's very strong between government cutbacks, between inequalities rising and social disorder. So when people think that things are getting worse and the government doesn't have their general interest at heart and is willing for the rich to get richer and most people to get poorer, over the last 100 years in many, many countries, that has been a trigger for social unrest and rioting. It isn't that rioters sit down and say, we'll do it for this reason, but there is a statistical relationship. You can expect trouble when you treat people in this kind of way. That's what countries which have much lower levels of inequality do. They're not impressed by people showing off that they've managed to make a lot of money. And that's how you get a much more civilised country. There are lots of examples of it happening. It has happened in the past. It's possible to happen again. But one of the main reasons you may well get it is if you've only got to look forward to a future without it, and you're looking at gated estates, you're looking at people being helicoptered between cities because they're afraid to drive, and you're looking at much, much higher levels of crime and disorder by people who've got very little to lose because they've given so little in the first place.
And to cap it all off, a full indictment of how far out of order the situation in Britain is today. This is a total outrage. No one would believe you if you told them such a story unless you read today's newspaper report of the proceedings at a coroner's inquest currently being held. On the 28th of May 2009, a 22-year-old man, Kane Gorney, a patient in St George's Hospital in Tooting, South London, died of dehydration. Kane phoned police the day before on 999 from his hospital bed because he was so thirsty. Police attended but were put off by nursing staff who claimed he was in a confused state and left. Kane was not given water to drink. He died of dehydration a few hours later. No one has been charged in relation to his death.
Much is being said in the mass media at the moment about current status of Julian Assange and Private First Class Bradley Manning. Are you able to shed some light on this for us?
Yes. Firstly, let's put the actions of Bradley Manning into its proper context. If you were a German soldier or a member of the intelligence services in Hitler's Nazi Germany, and you knew what was happening at Auschwitz and the other death camps, and you spoke out publicly or talked to the media, let me ask you this question. Are you a criminal and a traitor, or are you a hero worthy of the highest recognition and decoration? The answer is absolutely clear, unequivocal, and unambiguous. At no time could you ever be considered a criminal or a traitor, anything but. Your name should go into the history books as someone who had the courage to stand against evil and be counted. The case of Bradley Manning is no different. He was privy to information regarding United States actions and conduct in Iraq which he knew to be evil, criminal and wrong from any and every perspective. He decided that he couldn't live with himself and remain silent, and he shared this knowledge and hard evidence of it with others. The rest is now history and in the public domain, and I cite incidents such as the YouTube video referred to as collateral murder as an example of this evil. Bradley Manning is guilty of nothing, and as such should be released forthwith. For every day he has been held, including every day hereafter, he will be compensated fully. In addition, any person responsible for holding Bradley Manning in captivity after today will be charged with being complicit in the criminal wrongdoing of Obama, Bush, Blair and others. We have only this 17th day of June 2012 learnt of what has happened to Scott Ritter, former United Nations Chief Weapons Inspector in Iraq. This is the clearest demonstration that could ever come to pass, showing the evil that pervades every part of government in the United States today. This man is someone who should be and surely will become a future President of the United States. It truly makes me sick to my stomach that the people of the United States could ever permit such a blatant injustice and set up by people in the political arena who have a great deal to lose for their crimes, of a person who did everything he did and said for all the right reasons, and for no other reason than his empathy, compassion, caring and concern for his country, his countrymen in the military, and for the nearly 2 million innocent civilians in Afghanistan and Iraq who have died at the hands of these criminals. Marina Ritter should contact the Voice of the World as a matter of urgency at admin@tvotw.com. We will do the rest, Marina. This now brings us to Julian Assange. Note the modus operandi. They thought they could frame Scott Ritter as payback and to shut him up on a sex-related scam charge and to get away with it. Now we have the same setup with these women in Sweden claiming wrongdoing by Julian with these fictitious sex assault charges. Powerful people in the United States are obviously behind the entire sordid saga in their attempt to destroy Julian Assange and WikiLeaks with payback and a jail term for the rest of his natural life. The cries from all those that died on 9/11 and in Afghanistan and Iraq rings out across the heavens. The people of the United States and the world community will ensure that justice is delivered in full measure against those that deserve it for their crimes. Julian Assange or his legal counsel or his mother should contact the Voice of the World at admin@tvotw.com as a matter of urgency. One should never forget the evil demonstrated in the rape, murder and burning of 14-year-old Iraqi girl Abir Qasim Hamza, together with the multiple shooting murder of her mother, father and little 6-year-old sister Hadil Qasim at the same time by US soldiers Stephen Green, James P. Barker, Paul E. Cortez and Jesse V. Spielman on the 12th of March 2006, referred to in Chapter 459. Another soldier, Brian L. Howard, was convicted of being an accessory after the fact. Initially, the US military claimed the crime was committed by so-called insurgents. It was not until a member of the mass media in Australia published details of the truth of the incident involving members of the US military that any action was taken. The outcome: on the 4th of September 2009, Green was sentenced to life without parole. His accomplices got between 27 months and 20 years. Howard is already out on parole. If the crime was committed in the United States, the perpetrators would have received either the death penalty or life. Clearly, the life of Iraqis don't have the same value as people from the United States or elsewhere. And to make matters worse, and to add insult to injury, not a cent has been paid in compensation by the United States to the surviving two members of the Hamza family, 11-year-old Mohammed and his 9-year-old younger brother Ahmed, who were at school when the crimes were committed. I shouldn't have to emphasise this point, but this crime is a direct consequence of the crimes of Bush and Blair in the criminal illegal invasion of Iraq, by the removal of a functioning representative government under Saddam Hussein. The Bush and Blair governments are responsible for the security and welfare of every man, woman and child in Iraq at all times after the 20th of March 2003. The suffering these people have endured is beyond description. I can tell you from personal experience, as both my mother and father died together recently in the most violent way possible. They were healthy and well all their lives. They were the most kind, loving, understanding and compassionate mum and dad that anyone could wish for. They were there to give love and support always to all of their children and nearly 35 grandchildren, unconditionally, and they died many years before their time. We still can't believe it has happened, and we miss them as each day passes more than words can say. The above case of Abir Kazim Hamza doesn't stop there. This is just one of many more similar cases we have referred to in chapter 459. No one has been brought to account for any of these other incidents, indicating that this conduct is not only condoned but encouraged by the United States military. Viewers should be under no illusions or misunderstandings whatsoever. None of this, all of what has happened since 9/11 and is continuing to happen as we speak, will stop until the perpetrators behind it all are brought to justice. How many more people will you allow to die? If you live in Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, Libya, Palestine or Syria, you or one of your family may be next. Stop it now before they start on Iran as well. Finally, and in summary, the world and its people care about one thing and one thing only: that justice is done, the perpetrators of these crimes end up behind bars, and that the world is returned to peace and prosperity, which includes you and your long-term economic well-being. This will only happen if you follow a simple course of action to be outlined and made public in the coming days and weeks. This action consists of a few simple steps, steps which you can take with complete anonymity. To start with, the first step is for the world to speak with one single voice on every part of 9/11, Afghanistan and Iraq. This first step is very simple and very important to achieve critical mass on the internet. Open your web browser to a Google search page and type in @TheGlobalFund, no spaces. Clicking on the first result takes you to the Global Fund page on Twitter. Sign in or sign up for Twitter. Click the Follow Unspeakable Evil tab to become a follower of @TheGlobalFund. Phone, email or ask personally every one of your family, business associates or any person you know in any country, anywhere in the world to do the same. This is a standard function done every day by users of Twitter. In a matter of weeks rather than months, we need to see 2 billion Twitter followers of @TheGlobalFund around the world. If you believe that your mum or dad, relative or friend doesn't know how to do the above on their own computer, please help them and show them how, or, with their okay, do it for them yourself. From that moment forward, you and everyone else will receive every tweet, every message transmitted by the Global Fund and the Voice of the World instantly. We realise that for the people of the United States, the revelations and the facts referred to earlier are truly traumatic and beyond comprehension. As a consequence, we expect that you will take the lead in the pursuit of justice for 9/11 and every United States serviceman and woman who has died since under false pretences. If you are at university, you are ideally placed to ensure that this goes viral on the internet and to achieve the critical mass required for success. For the first time in history, you now live in an age where it is no longer necessary for you to put on a uniform and to go off to some foreign country risking life and death by placing yourself and your own physical well-being in grave danger in order to right the wrongs of others. No longer is it necessary to take to the streets and demonstrate. Many such demonstrations, such as the Occupy Wall Street protest in September 2011, involved considerable personal cost, time off work and travel costs to the participants. Ask yourself this one question. Did the Occupy Wall Street protests in the United States and elsewhere in the world fix or see a resolution to even one of the fundamental causes, reasons or factors which gave rise to the protests and demonstrations in the first place? The answer is no. Do you want this problem fixed once and for all time? Do you want social and economic justice for yourself and all peoples worldwide? If you want to ensure that all of that effort was not made in vain, if you or anyone you know had an interest in the Occupy Wall Street protests, the solution is simple. Follow the course of action set out herein. Do what you can to ensure that people the world over speak with one voice on these matters. Follow @TheGlobalFund on Twitter. Ensure that everyone you know does the same. The Voice of the World and the Global Fund will do the rest. With just a few keystrokes on a computer, you can achieve much more by an order of magnitude you wouldn't believe. The pen is far mightier than the sword, and in the coming months you will bear witness to this indisputable and incontrovertible fact. The perpetrators believe that they have got away with the 9/11 conspiracy and everything that followed thereafter. But you all know, and we know, that the truth has an uncanny knack of finding its way to the surface. And the truth will set you free. Seek and you shall find. Inshallah, God willing.